I will now introduce our third speaker, Dr. Said Gafurov. Said is a Russian scholar, a Marxist economist, orientalist, and he has also been a bureaucrat and is an opera critic. So he has worked in government, journalism, in the trade union movement, in electoral politics, and is a professor at the Moscow State Linguistic University. So Said, please go ahead.
Not that easy thing to remain interesting and be the third in a row. But I will try anyhow. With your kindest permission, I have some problems with connection. I will remove video if you don't mind.
Why don't we try with the video on as much as possible?
All
and
right.
if there are real difficulties, we will ask you to close it. Yeah.
All right. So I don't want to repeat what my highly respected colleagues used to say before me, and I will stress on some different issues. First of all, I want to say that while teaching students or while speaking in public, I always say, please try to avoid what I call political impressionism. What I mean is that the latest developments, the latest things which happen should not be always treated as a general rule that would continue for the world, and that is let us say, a historical law of development of society. Not necessarily. It can be fluctuation. And that is the first thing. The second thing which I want to point is that the general situation, the general changes, the tectonic changes which are going on in the world, and the Ukrainian issue and the Ukrainian conflict are two different questions that should be analyzed separately. And of course, I'm not the right man to speak on the Ukraine because it is my personal war. In 2014, the Kiev putschists on the 2nd of May, when they started to burn the opposition alive in the House of Trading Unions, and among those who killed was my personal friend. And what is most of all, after him, his mother remained, and I have to look at her eyes. And that is why I could not be really objective, but nevertheless, I'll try to do it. And I always say, when we discuss the thing, they say, why do you support the Putin's war? I say, it's not Putin's war, it's my personal war. They killed my friend. They killed my friends in the most cruel way. And they considered it acceptable. And I say they're losing their human nature because when they find, well, excuses for burning people alive in the House of Trade Unions. I say that the Ukrainian conflict is a class war. The best of the best of the Ukrainian nations, the cream of the cream that Ukrainian soil had ever produced, the miners and metal workers from Donbass, started a fierce battle with the declassed and lumpenized people hired by the oligarchy under the flag of the Kiev Putsch. Both sides, the oligarchy and the working class in the Ukraine, have found allies. The allies whom they could find. The Ukrainian oligarchies, and I want to remind you that they are directly appointed oligarchs as governors of the city. For example, the ill-famous Ukrainian banker, probably the richest banker, Kolomoisky, was appointed the governor of Dnipropetrovsk, and so on and so forth, directly. They found their allies, and they are the NATO. The NATO and some other countries, Japan, Australia, but mainly the NATO. The working class had nothing. The metal workers and the miners of Donbass had to find another ally. It happened to be Putin. Well, Putin is our ally, and I say, I behave like Stalin and Churchill during the Second World War, when they, in the worst period of war, in 1941, when Germans smashed the Red Army, or Rommel smashed Auchinleck in North Africa. They always say, well, I am fascinated by the fantastic, heroic resistance of, Stalin said, of the British army, and Churchill said on the Russian army. And that's what I say about the Russian army. They are our allies, and I am fascinated by the heroic resistance of the Russian army again in this war, in this conflict against the Ukrainian putschists. I would like to remind you that the civil war started in 2014, and by 2015, the working class of the Ukraine, the metal workers and the miners of Donbass, almost won. And Putin's politics stopped them. Putin stopped selling arms to the Donbass militias. It is a very important thing because many people didn't know that Russian deliveries of arms and ammunition to the Donbass militias were paid by the real money, in cash and in hard currency, in dollars and euros. And Putin stopped the deliveries of arms, and they signed so-called Minsk agreements, which, as we now know, the side of the oligarchs and their allies from NATO didn't intend to follow. I say that there is real fascism in the Ukraine, and it is according to all the definitions of fascism. First of all, it is direct dictatorship of oligarchy. I mean, they were appointed governors, and for a certain period of time, they were the governors. Then they have very chauvinistic and imperialist elements of financial capital in the Ukraine. And the capital of the Ukraine is the comprador capital, which is dependent on the international, on the Western financial capital. Monopoly capital among the petty bourgeoisie, among the industrialization of the Ukraine created a big number of petty bourgeoisie or declassified people who lost their class nature, and they appeal to peasantry, to artisans, to employees, officials, and in particular to the declassed elements in large city, trying to penetrate also into the working class in the Ukraine. So for me, from my point of view, it is a civil war in the Ukraine where Putin is just an ally on the one side, and the NATO is an ally on the other side. And for me, nothing has changed considering this situation since 2015. Lenin, as you know, wanted to transform the imperialist war into the civil war, and these current attempts to transform civil war into imperialist work just the opposite to Lenin is wrong way. That is one again. And I always say that the Russians, and when we say we don't mean the Russian army, we mean the resistance in the Ukraine. You should not forget that from refugees in the Ukraine, there are more Ukrainian refugees in Russia than in Europe now. Now maybe, comparable. From
Saeed,
this point of view, I have problems with communication. I don't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, Saeed, maybe we should turn off your video for a couple of minutes and then maybe turn it back on.
I don't hear you.
1 second. That's better. If you can you speak now?
Well, I'll try. I removed video with your permission.
Yes.
And I'm very sorry to say. So we want to say, and we also have a very, I have class consciousness. I believe that in the globalized world, the Ukrainian fascism. You know, many of us believe that fascism is something supernatural. It is like changing the nature of human beings, biological nature. No, you become a fascist because you are engaged in a fascist social relations, but you have no, I would say, horn on your head or third leg. No, nothing. The fascism is a very simple thing. You banned all the communists, or first communist party and then all the opposition party. You start direct stormtroopers marching and threatening to hang all the Russians speaking on what they call gilaka. Gilaka is a branch of a tree. And I think that if they succeed in the Ukraine, if the Ukrainian Nazism survive this conflict, they will use this experience all over the world. We should not be so sure that democracy, that human rights, that anti-fascism is something given us for granted. Nothing like this. It is just the way. And the masters of life tasted a taste of blood, you know, and they know that, and they learned it from Yugoslavia, from Iran, from Iraq, from Libya, and now in the Ukraine, that you can get your goals, achieve your goals through violence, through war. And they started to do it. And we see that these social conflicts in the Western countries, in particular in Europe, with this huge protests, mass protests against the politics of the ruling classes, they, I mean, would give an opportunity for the ruling classes to take the Ukrainian fascism experience to Europe or all over the world. And I see it as a very big danger. Of course, I mean, there was a big problem. I mean, I was against, now we call it reassociation of Crimea with Russia. And there, I can tell you, there was a very short period of time, several days, between the Crimea declared independence from the Ukraine and it joined Russia. And there was a meeting, ministerial meeting in Moscow, and I participated in it. And everybody was against, you know, taking Crimea inside Russia because of Ministry of Finance, Central Bank, everybody were against, for said, this complicated thing, not that easy, let them be independent and we'll give them money and support Crimea. And so all the people for different economic reasons. And then a very big man, an old man from the administration of the President Putin, stood up and said, "You're wasting your time. It's not a question of economic efficiency. It is a question of security." And the decision has been made. And it was before the 2nd of May in Odessa, because the tragedy. First we said, well, what do they, I mean, why do they say that? But in the end, I mean, after this tragedy in Odessa, we all know. So the situation is, there are two different questions. The Ukrainian question is a war against Nazism. It is a civil war of the Ukrainian working class against the Ukrainian oligarchy and their paid national. The regime in Kiev is by no means democratic. You know, the first decision after the putsch, the first legal thing which they organized after they won in 2014 in February was the dissolution of the Constitutional Court. After that, everything was allowed to the putschs. Of course, we cannot accept it. We are one and the same nations with the Ukrainian, not in the sense like this Russian world, people from the movement Russian world, but no. Nikolai Yanovich Azarov, the last legitimate prime minister of the Ukraine, said that according to the official figures of the Ukrainian government, 58% of the Ukrainian population had close relatives in Russia. We are one and the same nation from this point of view, and we cannot separate us. When we had problems, we found rescue in the Ukraine before 2014. I mean, and they were supposed, we must go and help them. It's not the question of Putin. Of course, Putin used this opportunity to settle the water problems in Crimea. I mean, but you know, among all the wars, there is one exception, which is, I mean, I don't say it is a legitimate war, but it is much more legitimate than all other, is water wars. I mean, which people are understandable. Putin found this solution and he did it. And I mean, I said, well, all right, we should discuss this question. It is a question of discussion. But nevertheless, the idea is that Nazism in the Ukraine should be ended. People stormtroopers who walk in columns in the streets and threaten to hang all the Russian-speaking on Gehilakas should be, each of them should be imprisoned. That is a minimum required for our common survival, for survival of the humanity, for survival. I mean, all right, let me please finish on it. I mean, I have a lot of things to speak, but no.
Yeah, I think, Said, if perhaps you can wrap up for now, and there will also be opportunity for you to say other things during the question and answer period.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.